Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a nice New Year's Eve celebration. We had that as well, and then we turned it around to cover the X2O trophy in Baal today. With me to do that is Issam. Happy New Year, Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me. Happy New Year to you and all our listeners. Hopefully we can have a great year. And as usual, as tradition, we start the year off with some cyclocross racing, Baal. And what a racing we got, because it was a great day of racing, I would say myself.
Yeah, if this is anything to go by, like the trend for this year, please bring more of it, because both races were great. I made the decision to also attend the race in Baal, and while it's the early awakening after a late night, it's, in my opinion, always a very fun race to attend. The dynamics there are fun, and there's these people that come out because it's New Year, so everybody from Baal is there wishing each other a Happy New Year. There's many people who, like I thought it was very well said on the broadcast, they come there to extend their hangover or to not get a hangover because they don't stop drinking. Like at 10, they will be drinking there after a 2-3 hour nap. Lots of people drinking the champagne rather than the beer. So quite a fun event, and also just a lot of people there. It was really, really busy today. Atmosphere was quite good. Enough about that. Let's actually go on and talk about the racing, because that was really good. Let's start then with the men's race. We had a interesting dynamic, because the big news in the morning came, Mathieu van der Poel wouldn't take the start. Immediately everybody was like, oh, okay, we're going to get an open race and maybe a repeat of Diegem. Well, the course in Baal doesn't really make for that. Van der Poel didn't start because he crashed in Loenhout and he injured his ribs there, and it didn't feel too good after Besançon, was the explanation given by the team. Early on in the race, Emile Verstringen and Pim Ronhaar took off at the front. They put the others under pressure. The others were Thibaut Nys. He had a bad start. He clipped out of his pedal on the start straight, and then he had a silly crash. He needed to chase. Eli Iserbyt, the Belgian champion, also took it slow. But under the pace of Ronhaar and Verstringen, Toon Aerts crashed towards the end of the lap. Michels made a mistake. These two riders came up front, and they were defending a gap. Nys moved forward, but was put backwards again when he needed to change his shoes. And in the second half of the race, Iserbyt settled into the groove. He closed the gap. Ronhaar, who'd done a lot of energy, placed one final attack when he saw Iserbyt coming, but it couldn't help. Iserbyt came back. We had three leaders. From those leaders, Iserbyt was clearly the strongest, had the most left in the tank. He powered away, took the win ahead of Ronhaar and Verstringen. Aerts managed fourth after that crash early on, and Nys, after all his misfortune, finished fifth. My question here, Issam, is Eli Iserbyt with the win here. His racing style, right? So we see it for three races in a row that he gets everything going in the second half of the race. He sits a bit back in the first half and then he moves forward. We saw it in Diegem, we also saw it in Besançon, and today the same. Well, we know Iserbyt from the past as a rider that always is dangerous in the final lap of the race. There was a period when going into the final lap with Iserbyt pretty much was equal to losing. This seems more extreme than it has been. Am I right in that? How do you see that?
I tend to agree with that, because I think that last year and the years before that, Iserbyt was a rider that sometimes had his moments at the first few laps, but I think that we now see a streamer form occurring at the moment during this season, and it's not helping him. And I think that also today, if you look at the way he started, the way he was going through the race, the first two laps, I mean, that was not great. I think he was somewhat lucky today that starting field wasn't as wide as it normally is at the top. I think that it was a little lighter. So for him, I think that was somewhat his benefit, because then you don't really lose out that much. He was able to get himself up front, and when he was there, as you say, it was somewhat clear that he had at that moment the strongest legs between the three. I think Ronhaar and Verstringen both had a very good race. But for both riders, when Iserbyt was up there, he was able to to ride away when he wanted to. And I think that is, if you look at the last couple of races from Iserbyt, it definitely wasn't the legs that hampered him. It was more the start and the way he opened his races. And it's just, when you do that, you get yourself in a lot of trouble. And you have to then sort of you have to work with a deficit, and that means that you have to put more energy in the opening of the race, or at least that middle part of the race, to get back into the race. Today it wasn't really the case. He was able to get himself to the front, I wouldn't say relatively easily, but he was there in the end, and that makes it just a little bit easier for himself. And we have seen that the lap times were not terrible in the last couple of races, and I think right now we just see on a course like we got with Baal, it's a tough course. It's a course that really asks a lot from a rider. I think today, he was very strong, and he made good use of it when he was able to make the best out of the bad start that he had, and eventually was able to get to the front and take the win.
Is it more extreme? I would say yes, but the question that really lingers is, does it have anything to do with his injury? And they kind of tried to ask that after the race, but there wasn't really a decisive answer. They said, well, in Diegem, I went a bit too hard in the beginning, and I wanted to avoid that on a course like this, just settle in the groove, maintain a pace I could keep up the entire race. Iserbyt doesn't really like this idea that everything is like related to his injury, but still, I mean, we're left with these questions, right? Because clearly it's a difference from how he used to be. Sure, Iserbyt wasn't necessarily the rider who always took the whole shot, but he was always up there. He was normally a rider that never was outside of the top 3-4 positions. Maybe he had the occasional bad start, but definitely not like it's been now. So that's the tricky thing here, and despite Iserbyt not liking the fact that everything is brought back to his injury, it's an undeniable influence on this season, and it will remain at the top of our minds until the end of the season, and potentially for the rest of his career, depending on how long this will keep lingering, and if what he says is anything to go by, it's going to be a lingering injury for the rest of his career. What it looked like today was that he, first of all, looked comfortable on the course. It's a good course for him. He can use the fact that he's a bit lighter but has good power on the climbs. It's a really, really grueling course. The climbs are quite hard and sometimes also a lot steeper than you can see on the TV. So that definitely worked for him. If we look at the opponents of Iserbyt, Ronhaar and Verstringen are the obvious ones to look at, but in the absence of Van der Poel, Thibaut Nys became the top favorite. It was his home race. What was up with him, Issam? Because it's the second race in a row that he starts as the favorite and has all things going wrong. First is the start, he unclips. Then it's the crash, which was a silly crash. Then it's his shoe breaking. Another good day for the Boa Hater Club. I question, that start, is that a consequence of nervousness? Is the Slim Shady not as cool as we think he is? Because there was a lot of pressure on him, right? Top favorite, it's the race of his dad. There's this talk, if he can win, at what point does the name of the race get changed? Well, he needs to win at least once for it to even be considered. He's parked right at the entrance. He has his own DJ there. There's this experience thing. There's schedules out there. At this time, Thibaut Nys will arrive, and people are herding in front of his camper van to see his arrival. There's a meet and greet time slot. There's a signature time slot. There is a pre-ride time slot. Everything is there, and this DJ is just playing from 10 till the end of the day. I think it said it would play until 6 for the after party. There wasn't much to party in the end.
No, there was not, and it's hard for me to judge if it's the pressure that got to him there, or we kind of know that they have some issues with the pedals. It's a mistake that sometimes is made. I think overall, if you look at how he was racing, some was obviously the crash there didn't help. Changing the shoe wasn't the greatest of things that occurred to him, and then he was somewhat in a flow that takes you kind of out. Then you have to fight back again, and it's hard for me to judge if it's the pressure. I don't really believe that. For sure, it is going to play a role. It's more than just a race, but I don't think that he is at the moment the type of guy for that is going to crack under pressure for a race like Baal. I think that today, he just had a lot of misfortune. It just didn't really go his way, similar to how he went in Diegem. And some of it is something that he had in his own, something that he could control. Crashing is something that happens within the sport, but at times you can prevent these mishaps in a way. And I think that it was a bit of a silly crash. I think that really kind of costed him in a way, and eventually you just get out of a rhythm. You're not really in it anymore, and your body feels it. You're mentally somewhat out of the race, and I think at a certain point he just also realized that it was going to be a battle for nothing. It didn't really motivate him at a certain point, and from there on it was basically Jente Michels that was somewhat his motivator to make sure that he was ahead of him. But that was somewhat the race of Thibaut Nys, and it's a bit of a shame because I think at least Diegem and also today were two races in which we saw him as a favorite, and to be honest, as a main favorite. And it's now 2 times now that he was not able to deliver, both because of circumstances which were created by himself and by others. It has to work sometime, I guess, and we have to wait and see when that time will be. Will it be the Belgium championships? It depends, what races is Van der Poel going to do? Is he going to skip Koksijde as well? It will be interesting to see how it will play out for Nys, if he will have an opportunity. But yeah, today wasn't the best of races for Thibaut, and that's sometimes how it goes. I think for him it's now a question of moving on, forgetting about the race today, and take the positives with you, knowing that you have good form, knowing that you have some good legs, and hope for a next chance.
I mean, the Belgian Championships will provide that next opportunity, right? That's going to be a fast course, typically, no matter what. Yes, it's changed a bit, but Zolder, it does not get super muddy. And even if it would, it's still a course with the big engines, and it should be something where Nys can do well. I look forward to that race. The men's elite race will be highly contested. But before we look ahead at that, today he did seem a bit nervous after that start to me. Like, he was eager to move up quickly, maybe a bit too quickly, but he also had that tendency in Diegem. And even if you think back to earlier in this season, there were a couple of times, even early in the season, it was even a reoccurring theme, at least in Belgium. 3 bad starts in a row for Nys. Can he cling it together? It's a vulnerability, blah, blah, blah. And he's always eager to move up quickly. Maybe he needs to be tempered a little bit, and they need to tell him, sometimes you need to calm down a little bit. You need to sit back, relax, take a breather, move up slowly, because then you avoid these silly mistakes, which put you even further on the back foot. And that was, in the end, what cost him today. I think without that shoe change, there's a good possibility he still competes for victory. He was with Iserbyt, he would have moved forward, and his assessment post-race was, I needed to change shoes, I lost connection with Iserbyt, I tried to come back to him, I tried to keep the gap the same as long as I could, but at some point the rubber band to Iserbyt snapped, and in my head something snapped as well. I lack the freshness to pull another super big push at this phase of the season, and I think that's valid. The tiredness is kicking in for everyone at every single level. Juniors I spoke about tiredness. U23s I spoke to said certainly tiredness was kicking in. Everyone is looking forward to Spain. And it's just a fair point. So it is what it is for him, and he will be very disappointed. He didn't say anything to the media initially. He just went to the camper van, and the media eventually gathered in front there, so he spoke to them. But he was disappointed, and it's only normal. We shouldn't forget that he's also still quite young and learning a bit, so we often forget that because he's such a big name and been in the attention for so long. Good, enough about him. Then the people who actually competed for the victory and were contenders there. Ronhaar and Verstringen. Ronhaar has had a couple of bad results, but now he shows something that kind of resembles what he did at the beginning of the Christmas period. To me, again, Issam, and you can be quite short and maybe talk about Verstringen if you agree, but feel free to voice your own opinion. Ronhaar lacks the endurance base. His preparation of the season was compromised. He has obviously a lot of talent and his form is not horrible. He got it together in Hulst and Zonhoven, but then he just... No, sorry, not Zonhoven. In Zonhoven he fell backwards with his back, but he got it together in Namur and Hulst. And then now it's the recovery isn't there. It's a bit harder, and sometimes you'll have an up and you'll also have many downs, and that's hard. And he certainly wasn't too happy in the post-race interview.
He was not able to see the positives of a podium, which I think he's maybe a little hard on himself, because I felt that today was also a very solid race. But in the post-race interview, he was talking about the back issues that he had, and he felt that in the last part of the race that it played somewhat of a role, but he was able to eventually finish it. And he said that obviously with the sponsors, with Glowy stepping in, that he wanted to give it his all and try his best to have the best possible result for the new sponsors. And I guess that he can be happy with his result. And I feel that his preparation and the way he entered this season was far from ideal. And that will obviously, kill you in a way. And if you also have back issues, I think that is just, that adds up in a way. And, it's a difficult season for Ron Haar, and he has to get through it and understand that it's not always going to be a great season. This is also one of those seasons that can happen. And hopefully for him, it's a one-off and not something that happened for multiple seasons. And from here on, just try to get better and better. And season is not over. He can still get some results and focus on some of the races that are coming up. But obviously, you will always kind of have this feeling that you're somewhat hampered in this season. And yeah, I think that for him, that's just going to be the main point. I mean, do you want me to go on for Stringer, or you have still something to add?
No, I agree with you. It's never fun, right? But every athlete has a season like this at some point in their career, and I feel like it also tells you something about the personality of Ron Haar, right? He always wants to give it his absolute everything and wants to be competing, and he knows he can. He showed that last year, so it's obviously very logical and very straightforward that he's disappointed. But as you say, he also needs to kind of accept that some races will be good and some will be bad. And he definitely seems to be able to reflect like that in longer interviews that are outside of the race context. But in the race context, post-race with the adrenaline, he certainly seems to be missing that type of reflection when the interviewer says that. And then for Verstringen, I feel like he is not necessarily in the complete same situation, but he too had that hamstring injury which affected his season a bit. He came back flying in Namur, and then this was a decent result, but honestly, I don't have that much to say about it. It's a good course for him, and he's done solid today, and also seen the depth of the field and the riders who made certain mistakes. He's kind of where I would expect him to be seen, his level at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he got a course presented again, which suits him somewhat well, but it was clear that during the race that he was the lesser of the two at the front with Ron Haar. And then when Iserbyt was there and Iserbyt was able to put those two under pressure, it was somewhat clear that it was going to be third for Verstringen. But as you say, he's young, he's talented, he's someone that can really rise to the occasion on these type of courses. And I think that is just, something that he has to cherish, despite the fact that he had a very hampered start and was not able to do many races. I think that he just needs to be very happy where he's at the moment, and we should not lose focus of the fact that he's still very young and there's still much that he can do. And yeah, he should just be very happy that he's racing at the moment at the front on courses that suits him well. And it's interesting to see what his growth will be in the future. But I think that these type of courses are going to be something in which, if he's able to grow, he's going to be a real danger for these elite riders. And it's going to be difficult to beat if he finds that extra in terms of progress and growth.
Let's look at the entire top 10 then. Behind Iserbyt, Ron Haar and Verstringen, we find Toon Aerts in 4th place. For Aerts, I think I can be very brief as well. He, at this moment, has been sick and he's done a lot of races. Tiredness is kicking in just that extra bit more. It's a bit inconsistent. He had that silly mistake in the opening phase of the race which put him back and never really recovered from there, but also didn't have the legs. He beat Nijs and Michels. Toon van der Bos finished 7th ahead of Cameron Mason, Michael Boros and Anton Ferdinande. We'll save our discussion on 7 Racing Team for an episode that's less packed, because we have a super action-packed women's race to get to, Issam. But before that, I would like to have your thoughts on Toon van der Bos. If we remember back way to the start of the season, you had some expectations for him in those early races, and to be honest, he also kind of delivered there. He was 7th in Beringen and 6th in Essen. After that, kind of anonymous. I don't really recall seeing him on many of the results sheets or many of the broadcasts even. How do you think he's looking at the season at the moment, and what do you think about his potential future at Krelan Corendon?
That is definitely a question that I was not expecting myself to ask in this part of the season, because I think that, as you say, he was a rider that was quite promising, started the season well, but then had just some, off days in a way, and some became quite a lot. And I think that can conclude at this point of the season that he's just not really delivering to a certain expectation that I had, and I think that several people had, in terms of what we could have expected from him. And he's just not really up there for the challenge at the moment to be someone that can battle it out in a lot of in top tens in a way. And that was somewhat where I expected him to be, someone that was able to get himself regularly in the top 10, and it just lagged in a way. He was not able to do that. And, the question will be, is he going to? I think that if he's not able to do so, that at a certain point time will be his enemy. Krelan will definitely try to give time to some young talent, which is coming up through the ranks of Roodhoofd. They always have young talent coming up through the ranks, and that is always going to put a guy like Tom van der Bos under pressure. So he has to get it together in a way and just get better. And it's sometimes a very hard sport. One day you are within the team, and the other moment you're out, and you have to find a new team. And I think it's not that dire at the moment. I think that he still has a future currently with Roodhoofd, but he has to step up a little bit and do better to secure that spot for the next couple of years.
Then let's go to the women's race, because they started the season with an absolute cracker of a race. I watched this race with some of our listeners who I met. That was really, really nice to meet some of them. And if you ever do want, you can just shoot us an email. But back to the racing. World champion Fem van Empel took a tumble early in the first lap, and that put her nearly half a minute down. She needed to chase race leader Puk Pieterse, who had an 8-second gap on Lucinda Brandt at the end of the first lap. Pieterse looked really good. She looked in control. Van Empel was chasing. Yes, she came a bit closer, but it wasn't that much. She mainly gained on Brandt, but Pieterse had a good day. Pieterse, who needed to skip Diegem because of illness, looked powerful. Probably the best she looked all season. But then she crashed in the trickiest corner of the course, a left-hander just before the long road climb. That put her back a bit of time, but especially looked to have broken up her rhythm. She started making a few more mistakes, got caught by Brandt, who then took the race lead. Pieterse sat in with Van Empel. We went into the final lap. Brandt was leading 10 seconds over Van Empel and Pieterse. Normally that should be in the bag for Brandt, and honestly for most of the final lap it did look so. Van Empel was being put under pressure by Pieterse, but then in that same left-hander, Pieterse made another mistake, needed to dismount and run. That was game over for Pieterse. It was Brandt versus Van Empel, and Brandt had the advantage, but on the final steep climb, Van Empel, who had been the strongest there all race, put in her best ascent of the day. She nearly made it to the top and closed at least 5-6 seconds on Brandt in that section alone. Still, with just a minute and a half of racing to go, Brandt had a lead of 4 seconds on Van Empel. But in the downhill, Brandt needed to do a weird half dismount with her foot on the other side of the saddle on the ground to avoid crashing. Van Empel gained a few seconds. Through the deep rut, both riders struggled, but Brandt just a little bit more than Van Empel. At the barriers, Van Empel put in her sprint. She closed the gap to Brandt just before the final corner and won the race in a very tight sprint. Issam, what a race, maybe the race of the season. To me, the European Championships are certainly still up there, but regardless if it's the best or one of the best, it was a pleasure to watch. And just like the men's race in Diegem, it had a lot of moments of going back and forward. I don't know, where do you want to start?
I don't know. It was crazy, I have to say. It really was crazy. I think I can start with Van Empel's mishap, the crash that set her back. And I have to say, when the crash happened, I thought, oh, here we go again. This is going to be one of those races in which Van Empel is just not going to be able to deliver, because, before the race, I definitely thought that she was going to be the main protagonist and also the one that could win this race I wouldn't say in incredible easy fashion, but at least, it suited her quite well. But that was not the case, and it was the dynamic completely switched in a way. And I think that we saw Pieterse, as you say, that was super strong in the first part of the race, and also I think looked good on the bike for the first time this season. It was just it worked technically. It also looked well up until that mistake. I think in my head I was thinking like, okay, this is going quite well also technically for Pieterse, and I think a minute later or 2 minutes later there she was. It was a nasty crash in a way because with all the mud and stuff, I think it affected her quite well because you could see she lost quite some terrain just before, when she went on that climb. The rhythm was completely gone. And yeah, it was for Brandt the moment to put her under pressure. And I think from there, Pieterse never really got into the race. The question I had was, is it one of those moments that we have seen from Pieterse already, midway through the race, or at least to the later phases of the race where she struggles a little bit and has some difficulties to maintain the pace? I don't think I got a real answer of that because it's just difficult to judge that. It's hard to say if it was because of the crash that it just wasn't really there. And then Van Empel, you saw at a certain point, the last 2 laps, you saw that Van Empel was pushing and being able to get through with a bigger gear than the rest, and he was all a little bit faster. She was getting better through the climbs. It was more powerful, but she was still in a position where you would think it's not gonna happen. It's just too far. And I think that last lap where she was able to, where they all had to get off, but Brandt got off quite early, and where Van Empel was able to just get that little bit more, or actually quite a bit more. I think from there on, Brandt maybe was really wanting to have the finish already there, but I think she was also, quite nervous on losing this race because, she saw how much Van Empel was gaining, and from there on, I think it was, we saw an incredible sprint. Van Empel from a position I would say that not a lot can win, and she was still able to put it off, and I think today was for Van Empel was a mental, warfare in a way, in terms of trying to still get this race to a victory. And I think that she was in a position in which many would have given up, or at least it's this part of the season in which you focus on the next race. But she didn't, and I think that is for her props. But you can also see the vulnerability of her, in which that mistake and losing the ground that she did, and those are things that she has been doing so far this season a couple of times, and that is something that you do not want to do when it comes to the World Championship. So it was a very interesting race, and I have the feeling that I've been speaking for hours, so please take over.
So if you break it down, I think everybody at the front made mistakes just at different moments and of different importances. So Brandt made them at the end, and those few seconds probably cost her the race. She also had that crash earlier, but that was not that big of a deal. Van Empel crashed early on and needed to chase all race, whereas Pieterse had a crash, broke up her momentum, and the mistake at the final lap put her back. So if we move away from the moments, but look at just the general performances, starting with Pieterse, I think this is the best she looked all season. Yes, she did fall back in the second half of the race, but I still think that was mainly due to that mistake and then just the mistakes piling up a little bit. It is kind of part of her style. She races on the edge and makes a few more mistakes than her rivals, but this was still a bit excessive. So she looked better power-wise and technically, and I get that mainly from the fact that she was able to stick with Van Empel and also have something left to put Van Empel under pressure in the final lap. Van Empel, however, I think was the strongest rider, and without that crash in the first lap, I think she would have taken a quite easy victory. But she was the strongest because she managed to recover from that 30 seconds down on Pieterse, 20 seconds down on Brandt. Brandt was the consistent factor, and I don't know if she really panicked at the end, Issam. I feel like she was just completely cooked. She was completely done. She had nothing left in the tank, and it kind of looked like that all race. She was working hard for every single second, every single meter. She needed to really ride with that grinta. She's done a lot of races in this period. The tiredness is mounting up, not to repeat everything I said before, but these things also factor in for Brandt. And I think that mainly made the difference at the end. She was so tired, she couldn't keep it under control. And really, that running in the 2 final laps on that steep climb, it did not look fast. It's very steep, the running there is very awkward, but it's very, very, very slow what Brandt did. And normally she can run quite a bit better than that. I mean, even Pieters, who's not the best runner, was at least matching Brandt's pace there. I think it was just empty. It was, however, a super impressive save in that downhill following that climb, because her foot was swung over the saddle, ready for a dismount. She dabs it on the ground and then just swings it back over and continues pedaling like nothing happened. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in a cyclocross race. And then the legs were just empty. Van Empel takes the win. I guess, what does this mean for the World Championships? Hard to tell, but I do think this kind of supports my point of Van Empel being a bit more vulnerable this year. Sure, she takes the win and she's the strongest rider. I'm not afraid to admit that, but the point I've been trying to make is if Van Empel makes one mistake this year, she's beatable, whereas in previous years she could make 1 or 2 mistakes and still win quite comfortably. And today, definitely after that crash, she looked a bit more conservative. The corner where Pietersen crashed, I saw many crashes there today. I had a very nice morning watching juniors like crash there, going diving, sliding in the mud. And Pietersen also was victim there. She wasn't the only one. And Van Empel definitely took especially that corner a bit more cautious after that crash.
I think that we definitely can conclude that this season Van Empel has been more vulnerable than she had been last year. I think that point is definitely a point that we can make at the moment. But we also have to take into consideration that, they went for a different approach this season. They really want to lay the focus entirely on the Worlds. Want to be good now, but, they want to be at their best at the Worlds. And I think that for Van Empel is going to be the $1 million question in a way. What can we expect from Van Empel at the Worlds? If she's going to be even better than she is at the moment, well, I think that today showed that even after everything she had to go through, she's still able to pull off with a victory. So it's difficult at the moment to say what it will do for the Worlds, and I think also, frankly, a bit too early. But I think that Van Empel definitely has some work to do in terms of just making sure that those mishaps do not really happen. As you say, it was a tricky moment of the course, and it's just something that can happen. It's not entirely possible to get through a course without. But I think that it just has happened on critical moments at the moment, and you just hope for that it's not going to happen at the Worlds, because then what the competitors will do with such a situation. So, yeah. Difficult for Van Empel, but I think for now she just has to take the positives and be very happy with the victory, which she was.
Let's look at the entire top 10 then, because behind the podium of Van Empel, Brandt and Pietersen, there was a 3.5 minute gap between the leader and 4th place finisher Sanne Kant. In her final race here, she took a 4th place ahead of Manon Bakker. NRK finished 6th ahead of Raphaël Carrier. Kiona Cabé was 8th ahead of Imogen Wolf, and Katie Klaus completed the top 10. I think definitely here on the women's side, and we've covered this plenty, there were a lot of absent riders. The X2O trophy is not important at all. And you probably by now know our stance, right? The time classification doesn't work, as illustrated by this year's classification, both on the men's and the women's side. Brandt leads by 10 minutes on Van Empel and Vorst, and then 10th place Zoe Backstedt is nearly 20 minutes down, did 2 out of the 5 races. On the men's side, equally poverty, with Iserbyt far ahead of Aerts, and then Van der Haar was out with a knee injury. So the start fields weren't really there. Some other riders can showcase themselves, but even those riders weren't really here today. I would maybe say Imogen Wolf is somebody we should discuss briefly. Issam, she was doing quite well, but then in the 3rd lap she kind of fell back from 5th place to 9th place and didn't really recover from that. I feel like she just went out a little bit too hard. Don't really think there was any further explanation behind that. Whereas Carrier, definitely just like last year we saw some junior women do well here. Carrier does it this year with the weaker start field, and She's been sick before the Besançon World Cup, and now she's showcasing her talent here with 7th place. And yeah, I feel like that's in line with what we've seen this year, like 19th in Namur.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at least there's some revenge from Imogen Wolf in terms of getting a top 10 compared to last year, where it was not really possible in the end. While she was actually within the top 10 for almost the entirety of the race. So yeah, I think, as you say, it was maybe she got a little too carried away. She was close to Kant. I think that maybe that pace was just maybe a bit too hard for her, and this was really a course that if you overdo it a little bit, you will pay somewhat the price, and I think she somewhat did. But there's no harm in that. You have to try, right? So I think that in the end for her, it's just one of those races where you just learn and get through it and use that experience in the next couple of races. So that's basically the part of progress at the moment, the process as a whole, where they are at. You know, you have to learn, and that's how you are going to get better. And I think that is the phase wherein they are. And these are type of races in which, as you say, not that many riders that normally would be featuring in the top 10 are here. And that just helps even more, because then you're a little bit more at the front, and it's not racing for 20th or 25th, but it's racing for a top 10. And I think that just helps maybe a little bit more in the development. So it was great to see, and good for them that they were able to to mix it up.
Let me end the podcast with 2 transfer news, short news notifications. First, Puk Langenbach finished 13th today. She is being picked up by Phoenix de Koning, very good rider on the road as well. The U19 junior woman road European champion. And then Denise Betsema, who didn't race today, will be racing for the Baal Siebel Clementines until the end of the season. They extended her so it would be easier to find a new team, so pretty much confirming the exit in that as well. Good. Issam, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me.
One day off, and then we start the final triple header to complete our Christmas blitz. We will hit Koksijde on Friday, then Gulligem on Saturday, and Dendermonde on Sunday. Thanks everyone for listening. Catch you guys soon. Goodbye.